Eagles. Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Monday edition of Birds 365. Kicking off another week here in the Eagles offseason as we move closer to the NFL draft. Johnny Mac, how you doing this Monday morning, brother? Kicking off a new week of Birds 365.
Yeah, we're now officially, I could say, in the draft season. Pretty much phase 1 and phase 2 of free agency are over around the NFL. You'll see some things trickling in. Then you might have some more meaningful signings after they don't count towards the compensatory formula, which happens the week after the draft. So there'll be things trickling in before that around the league, but the big stuff, the waves are pretty much over. And now we can shift. It seems later this year we can shift to draft season fully. Obviously, We'll talk about everything, but. Yeah, this to me is this once free agency dies down, then you get really into the draft, and it makes more sense because, look, all mock drafts are fruitless, but they're completely fruitless before free agency because, if you have one of the big dominoes still to drop is Aaron Rodgers. So I think everybody's got Pittsburgh maybe taking a quarterback in the draft. Well, they ain't taking a quarterback if they bring in Aaron Rodgers. So
you don't think so? Maybe they still could. No, I mean, with
they could aging, but people are talking about Jackson Dart. I don't think you're. I saw a bunch of people. Pittsburgh's like 21 or something.
Yeah, apparently
I don't think you push it.
Too.
You might have to push it if you don't have Rodgers, but I don't think you have to push that sort of reach if you do.
Yeah, just because of the class, right? I mean, we'll see what ends up happening. But John does bring up a good point where you got to let some things fall into place before you can really get into the draft. And now we are officially 1 month away. The draft is that Thursday night, round 1 is April 24th. Today is March 24th. So we are 31 days and 12 hours away, everybody, from the NFL draft kicking off. So we'll have a month straight of great coverage here on Birds 365 and on JAKIB Sports. For those who are new, we want to welcome and thank you all for listening. We're the best Eagles daily show out there. All right, we're here 8 to 10 a.m. every single day, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Zander Krause. That's my co-host, John McMullen, the number 1 Eagles beat reporter in town. Johnny Mac, speaking of the draft, I did want to set the stage with a little bit of draft talk here to start the show. We'll talk to Jeff Kerr coming up on the show in about 15 minutes from now, but we talked a little bit about the 4 meetings or visits, top 30 visits to Eagles that have been released. And they're 4 straight offensive linemen, Johnny Mac. A lot of defensive line talk, anticipation coming into this draft. But could the Eagles just do what the Eagles do? Mekhi Becton's gone, and they might go offensive lineman. Is it fair to say that it's a good chance the Eagles do go offensive lineman while everybody's thinking they go D-line?
Well, no, I mean, there's a good chance they always go offensive line anywhere, but certainly this is that I wouldn't get caught up in 4 and the Eagles don't release anything, 4 reports of visits. Certain guys, Anthony Belton, Marcus Embo from Purdue, they confirmed themselves they were coming in for top 30 visits. Josh Connerly. It's probably the one of the group that is potential first-round pick. That was reported, I believe, by the Oregonian. And then Jalen Travis was our buddy Zach Berman. So, and he's an offensive tackle. No, all of them. The only one with a potential to go at 32 is Connerly. So they're focused on the first round. They're going to bring in plenty of defensive front. They got 26 that haven't been. They're gonna bring in plenty of defensive front people. So with the Eagles, it's offensive line, defensive front first, foundational principle. Both of them equally important. Obviously, quarterback is first, but I think stipulated. But they already have a quarterback. Then it's offensive line, defensive front. That's how they build this team. Howie's been very honest this offseason if you listen to him. He talked about it different. Talked about it being not typical. what he was talking about was paying an off-ball linebacker and letting defensive front people go on defense, paying, giving Saquon more money after the season he had at running back. Two positions they traditionally don't pay. If you look at the history of this franchise, but they had 2 All-Pro players last year, and they were Saquon Barkley and Zach Baum.
Yeah.
That's 2 first-team All-Pro. So arguably the guy who had the best season on offense and arguably the guy who had the best season on defense, and they deserved everything they got, but that's not typical. Now, he also indicated, and then we're going to fall back to the more traditional aspect
Right.
of when the draft and that's offensive line and defensive front. They have, if you talk about day 1 and day 2, nothing in life is guaranteed because you don't, especially when you're 32nd, because you're dealing with 31 other teams and their wants and their desires, and they might conflict with your wants and your desires. But if you're a betting man, bet on them getting an offensive lineman and a defensive front player, both on the first 2 days. Both.
It is, yeah. It is funny, Johnny Mac, how, we've talked about this philosophy of the Eagles for so long where, remember last season when we didn't know what Zach Baum was going to be, we talked about, has Howie gone too far with just kind of letting the linebackers go? And before Saquon, the question was being asked about the running backs, and then they both have that big of a season. It's on their way to a Super Bowl victory. There is a little bit of irony to that, how you have a first-team All-Pro running back and a first-team All-Pro linebacker in the year that you win a Super Bowl after Howie kind of devalued him, and it just fell into his lap that way. But it worked out, and he paid them both, and now we go on to the traditional build for the Philadelphia Eagles. I think it's going to be D-line, John, just because you obviously have so much to pay in that spot coming up in the future, and then you also lost 3 guys in that room. So it's going to be interesting to see. But last week we talked about some edge options, some people at 32. We're going to get some draft guys on this week. I reached out to Ian Cummings to get him back. I reached out to Rick Saratella, Johnny Mac. I want to get Rick on the show. I haven't talked to Rick in a little bit, so we'll see if we can get him on. But plenty of options at 32, John, for this team. It's going to be interesting to see how the board falls for this team, whether they move up or down. John, I haven't ruled out moving up. I think they could move up. If they like a player, they could package a couple of those picks and move up, in my opinion. I know you say it's more likely they move back, but I think they want to maximize their value. And if they like a guy, I think they're going to move up to get him.
Well, that's, that I agree they want to maximize their value. And with the 32nd pick, that typically means moving down because you're trying to take advantage of somebody who wants to get the 5th-year option. So,
right.
Basically everything about the draft is odds. And that's why I say, the one thing Howie proved, and he would, say, hey, now there's 2 parts of this for Howie. There's people who say, look, you finally paid a running back and you got a star running back. And the assumption is, if he just would have paid a running back, he would have been Saquon Barkley to some people, or vice versa. He didn't even pay Zach Baum. Zach Baum's the one who landed in his lap. He paid him after. So he proved, hey, if you perform, I'll pay this position. Now, part of it, no doubt, was a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you pay guys 1 year, $3.5 million, typically you're going to get 1 year, $3.5 million value, which they did for many years with Eric Wilson and Paul Warlow and Corey Nelson, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You sign those types of players in free agency, you tend to get those types of players. And running back, they actually had very good running backs for a number of years. But you saw the difference, and part of it was the offensive line as well. But you saw the difference from a good running back to a great running back. And the assumption is that if you just would have paid somebody else, that they're going to have the season Saquon Barkley had is probably a little bit specious. Not a little bit, probably completely specious. So, they were outliers at their particular positions, and that's why the Eagles went towards the outlier. And that's, but that doesn't mean they're going to keep doing that. because whenever Saquon, his shelf life is up, it's going to be very difficult to find the next Saquon, especially if you're very good, as the Eagles are right now. When Zach Bond's shelf life is up, it's going to be very hard to find somebody who made plays like he did last season. Even if you're taking somebody in the first round of the draft.
It's going to be hard for Zach Bond to do it.
Yeah, it's going to be exactly. So everything relates to odds, and that's why it's more likely down than up. But yeah, you know, if there's a player at 28 and he's the last in the cluster that they want,
right?
Yeah, they might go up and get him. It might be Josh Connerly. You know, if they have a feeling that he's going to go and they want him, yeah, they'd go up. But if you're playing the odds, the more likely scenario is they want to take advantage of somebody and maybe get a future second round pick or something splashy and go down.
I could see him doing that. It'll be interesting to see what they end up doing, you know, in the draft at that position. But I don't know, John. The one thing I would say about the offensive tackles, I know everybody wants to prepare for life after Lane Johnson. You see how well it worked out with Cam Jurgens coming in for Jason Kelsey, and obviously the replacements that we've had on the offensive line. But I have a feeling Lane Johnson is going to play at least 3 more seasons. At least. I feel like he played one of his best seasons that we've talked about extensively here on the show last year. I feel like he's getting better, and I feel like the window for this team is right there. I don't see Lane Johnson hanging him up. He might go Whitworth. He might go till he's 40 or 38. I could see it happening, and then you don't really need a tackle right away. You need swings and guard replacements probably.
Well, he might, but, you know, from being around Lane for a long time now, I mean, if you would ask me that question 2 years ago, I would have said, no way. He's out to maybe 2 years, maybe out right now. What's changed? He's been healthy. You know, if he feels good, but he's very honest and he feels great and he's been healthy and he is playing better than he ever has. So all that part is true. But when he had those ankle issues.
Yeah, he was struggling.
Yeah, like he was like, yeah, I can't do this much longer. And then they figured it out. They had reconstructive surgery and he's feeling better. So, but he's very honest at all the ends when he says, I think I can play through 2027. You know, we signed the contract. He always puts at the end, it's a year-to-year proposition. He's talking about his health, how his body feels. So there's no doubt he can play. Him and Kelsey are weird in the fact that they get better as they get older. But typically, it's the opposite. Offensive line's a little bit different, though, because the savvier you get, I think it's more important. I bring up Tim Irwin. Guy people don't, you know, I tell that story all the time. Became a great agent after his playing career. Played like 17 years. Now, he wasn't at the level of Lane Johnson, but he played 17 years.
That's a long time.
And he always did a really good job against Reggie White, you know, maybe the greatest defensive player of all time. If not, maybe number 2 to Lawrence Taylor. Always did a great job because he held and he scratched and he clawed and he had the veteran reputation to get away with some of that stuff. Then he finally retired and they bring in Corey Stringer, first round pick. Unbelievably talented. Sad story what happened to him. I tell that story all the time as well, but unbelievably gifted. Not nearly as effective early in his career as Tim Irwin because he's a rookie. He's not savvy. He doesn't get away with stuff. He can't hold. He can't pull.
Right.
That shit matters. I always joke about Kelsey. Watch Kelsey if you want to go back. He would steal the tush push aside. He would steal a quarter of a yard just by moving the football.
Yep.
And he'd get away with it. Every once in a while, you'd see the flag and they'd go, you went too far, Jason. All the time. he would do it.
And it's funny because it is one of the most physically taxing positions on the entire field. Like if you're a wide receiver, you might not get hit every single play. If you're a quarterback, you might not get hit every single play. If you're a running back, you might not get hit every single play. If you're an offensive lineman, you're getting hit every single play. So it is a little bit two-sided where I think you're right. Obviously, the savviness and the technique and some of that stuff makes you great later, but boy, it's got to be physically taxing for these guys to play till they're 35, 36, 37
the assumption, and that's why I talk about Lane, the assumption is, oh, he's healthy. He ain't healthy. It's funny you bring that up because I was who did Jason and Travis had Ben Stiller on. They're getting all these big time.
Yeah, they're no longer getting like Philly people on.
They're getting Ben Stiller. They're getting Jason Sudeikis announces Ted Lasso's coming back. They got Bill Murray.
They've gone full Hollywood on us.
They've gone full Hollywood. But so I was watching some of the Stiller clips, and he asked about something about the physical nature of football, and Jason's moving his neck and it's creaking around and freaking people. I mean, Jason Peters used to go through a 40-minute stretching routine to get damn practice. Lane Johnson, like I said, those guys go through hell. Jason looked like a stormtrooper with his elbow and everything taped up, and people assume, well, he's out there, so he's fine. He's not fine. And that's why Lane always puts that in there. It's year to year at the very end, but he's feeling very good, and that's a positive, and he got through this season healthy. But using the ankle as an example, that pops up again.
Yeah, I can see it.
So anytime you get to that age and play that physical of a position, it's always year to year.
Yep, I agree. The one thing I will say this about Lane. I think Lane is one of the more interesting guys who does press conferences. Not that he says anything that's going to get a bunch of headlines, but I do think he's very honest, and you can see the depth of his knowledge in some of his answers. I like to listen to Lane Johnson.
Oh, I love talking.
Yeah, I do too. I think he's one of the guys that look like, some people are bored by offensive linemen or whatever, but I love listening to Lane. I find him to be very honest and very knowledgeable.
This is 32 teams. The most interesting people to talk to are always the offensive linemen. Always. Good, bad, and they just happen to have a bunch of good of them. Bunch of good ones here. They're always, I don't know what it is, but they're always intriguing to talk to. With Lane, I mean, you learn a lot about the game, a lot about the preparation of the game. Toe spacers. I had a 20-minute conversation about toe spacers. And, Nolan Smith brought it up. It was a funny press conference from Nolan Smith because he taught Nolan Smith about toe spacers. And Nolan Smith went off on this tangent one day and he was looking at a female reporter, which is kind of weird, and the female reporter had sandals on. He's like your toes are all crunched up. You got to spread out your toes. And he's telling people when you're sitting, if you're sitting, spread out your toes. Because for football people, and Lane described it as, if your feet hurt and it sucks to play football. That's a direct quote from.
It's also a leverage thing too. People have been talking about that. Like back in the day, I guess when we were a more primal creature than we are now, your toes were much more spread. It was for balance. It was for trucking the land.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's a whole thing, but it's something I think the average person doesn't think about. And NFL players are very keen on it. And he was the first one that clued me into toe spacers.
Bird just checked in. He's like, "What the hell are we talking about?
Toe spacer. It's the off season."
He knows. Yeah, he knows about the toe spacer comments. But no, I do find Lane to be very interesting. It's going to be very interesting. Speaking of it, to see what the Eagles do in the NFL draft coming up. 31 days and 12 hours, Johnny Mac. So in 31 days and 12 hours, the first round of the NFL draft will be just kicked off. It's 8:22 in the morning. So at 8:22 at night, we'll be just underway. You might know the first or second pick by that point. Will it be Cam Ward? Will it be Shedeur Sanders? Will it be Travis Hunter? We will see. 31 days, 12 hours out, everybody, from the NFL draft. Now we have Jeff Kerr set to join us here on Birds 365. Let's go to Jeff now, joining the show. Jeff, welcome to the show, man. Welcome to Birds 365 on this Monday morning. How you doing, Jeff? How was your weekend, brother?
It was great. I didn't have to talk about the NFL.